What is up? What is up? Welcome to another stream of Greek history. It is, we are in a bad place for the Greeks right now. But before we get into it, of course, we must invoke the Muse. Dear Muse, let us have an educational stream where we learn something from the lives of our ancestors. The sacrifice has been made, the blood spilled. Let's begin. So, the Persians have gotten through Thermopylae. The Greek fleet that was stationed here in Artemisium retreated once they found out that Leonidas and his soldiers had all fallen. So they go through here. This choke point is called the Euripus. I just learned that. Very excited about that little piece of geographical arcana. Xerxes' army, meanwhile, marches down the entire region of Boeotia, where Thebes is the largest city, but this entire area is filled with fertile plains and populous polis. This entire area Medizes. They join the Persians. Um, then, at where we left off last stream, was here as Xerxes' army approaches Athens. They are burning down every place that they see that does not or has not already joined the Persian alliance. Right now, the Greek forces are meeting, and there is a debate over what to do and where to defend their homeland. So here we are in Attica. This is Athens here. We're going to take the road down. We're going to go into Athens as we talk about Xerxes' conquest of this region. So let's jump off this guy's head. Woohoo! And once we get to flat ground, we'll grab our horse. So there's a large contingent of Peloponnesians in the alliance at this point, and they are being led by the Corinthians. The Corinthians are the most powerful naval force from the Peloponnesus. Let's take a look where Corinth is, right here, at the bottom of this isthmus, and they are a major mercantile and trading state. So they are leading a faction under this guy Adamanthus, saying, hey, let's all just retreat back to the Peloponnesus, and we're currently building a wall across the isthmus. And that's where we can hold off from the Great King. There is one viewpoint I want to see in this area. There it is, right behind me. Before we go. The Euboeans, from that island off the coast of Attica, Euboea is here. As the fleet is retreating, they bribe Themistocles to keep the Greek fleet there. Themistocles then turns around and bribes a bunch of other people. Oh, perfect. I'm glad we're here. In order to get the fleet to at least hold out in Artemisium for a little longer. But at this point, the Greeks are in full retreat, and they're not sure where they are going to make their next stand after Thermopylae has fallen and Thebes and Boeotia have Medized. So here's a burned farm. First off, let's take a look at this before we zoom in. We can see here the destruction. This game, again, is set during the Peloponnesian War. This is a burning of Attica committed by the Spartans. However, this looks exactly like what Attica would have experienced 50 years before during the Persian invasion that we're talking about. Persian siege tactics were a bit more advanced than those of the Greeks, for they knew how to build ramps to get their troops past the city walls, and they also knew how to undermine them. This explains their successes in taking the Ionian cities in Asia Minor that revolted before the outbreak of the Greco-Persian Wars. I love this. I've talked about siege tactics before. What's up, Isaiah? You've got walls in the ancient world, and the ancient world is completely stymied by walls. Like, these are really hard to get over. We're not all assassins from Assassin's Creed. We can't just climb over them. And so the Greeks are like, oh, frick, how do we do this? We know about ladders. Okay, we do that, which is really hard, especially with all the armor. But the Persians are like, yo, we'll just build a ramp that goes up to the top of the wall, and then we'll just climb over the wall. Easy. And using this, like, unbelievably simple tactic, they conquer all of Western Asia. like all of Turkey falls because they can't stand up to the ramp. It would take another 200 years for the Greeks to learn how to properly build siege machines that were capable of breaching walls. I do believe we've learned in other places that they did have battering rams, at least. That's a pretty simple concept, like fist, you know, face, battering ram, gate. It's the same concept. Usual siege tactics involve two main approaches. The first was starving a city into submission, but that was time consuming and exposed the besieging army to the same hardships as the besieged. It was almost impossible if the city in question was supplied by sea, this being the case of Athens during these times. The second method involved having spies or collaborators within the city walls that would open the gates for the besiegers. So the Persians spent a lot of time and money infiltrating cities to get someone to throw open the gates. This was the case during the first Persian invasion. It was likely that there were people in Athens ready to throw open the gates for the Persians. There were like signals being sent from the top, from high places in Athens. Um, and right now, Athens fully, completely retreats out of the city. We'll talk about this in a little bit, but at this point, Athens was not capable of supplying itself from the sea. And so when the Persians invade, they make the decision to completely evacuate their city because they're not going to be able to stand up to Persian siege engines and techniques. Therefore, the most common option for the attacker, this is going back to the Greek side of things, was to devastate the fields of the defender to provoke the latter to accept an open battle. This explains, in a way, the development of the Hoplite Phalanx rather than hit-and-run tactics using skirmishers. The Phalanx was formed of a line consisting of the very same citizens that were interested in defending their belongings and their crops, while hit-and-run tactics risked the destruction of those same crops. So, yeah, that's an excellent point. And it goes back to this fundamental concept of democracy, is that in this era, you have citizen soldiers, and that means the same people who are voting are the same people who are farming, are the same people who are fighting for this very land. And so they will march out en masse with their entire community, the people who vote alongside them, the people they debate with in the ecclesia, and they will stand toe-to-toe with them and fight to defend their land. So we're seeing all these devastated houses. This is from the Spartan invasion. Let's see, am I going the right way? I believe I am. So as the Persians are coming in, they are of course devastating land. This is a Spartan camp. Suspect. The Spartans wouldn't have a camp this close to Athens until the very end of the war. That was when they built a camp that allowed them. Oh look, Athens is prepared for a siege. Not gonna happen. And that was when, under essentially a traitor to Athens, told the Spartans to establish a full-time fortified camp right outside their walls that their slaves could flee to. And this allowed them to sap the Athenians' ability to use its lands effectively. The same Spartan destruction and devastation of their crops could then happen year-round. Slaves could leave the Athenian fields, leave Athenian silver mines to be freed by the Spartans, or maybe just re-enslaved. I hope not. So that's what we may have just passed through, but that seems a little suspect. But it does show you how much walls create a stalemate in siege tactics, where you can have a Spartan camp right outside the walls, and besides arrows, there's not much that the inhabitants can do if they're not willing to face an outright confrontation of phalanx on phalanx. So what we're doing here is we're approaching the Acropolis of Athens. So, as I mentioned before, the Persians came in, they were devastating the land, and they were being supplied by the sea. Excuse me for a second. So they could hold out indefinitely, much longer than the Athenians could, who had a massive population that was fleeing all of Attica, coming into the city walls, and like, oh my god, we're terrified. And so, as the Persian army advances down this area, they pass the mountains and they start to storm through Attica, burning and looting as they come. The Athenians begin to retreat. And so what they decide to do is completely evacuate the city So under the leadership of Themistocles, who's one of the 10 archons and the most vocal proponent of the navy, uh, the entire citizen population retreats first to the island of Salamis, which I'll show you on the map, and potentially then Aegina. So Salamis, which we will end our tour with today, is this island directly across from the Piraeus, and this is the central port that we saw a few weeks back. In the meantime, there were a few people, about 40 people, who decided to stay in Athens. The rest of the city was completely abandoned, and these 40 people, of course, stayed at the Acropolis, the Acropolis being the ancient fortified place where people could always run and seek shelter in times of disaster. So they were up here. They built wooden walls. An oracle of Delphi had told Athens that they would be saved by their wooden walls, and Themistocles argued that this meant their navy, their wooden naval vessels. But these people who stayed in Athens the longest and against the Persian invasion, they built a wooden palisade wall up here to protect themselves against it. What we just did, so as the Persians enter Athens completely uncontested, these 40 priests and other dignitaries, or whomever, who are sworn to uphold the shrines and protect the grove, etc., of Athena, up top here, not a grove, but there is a sacred olive tree. This is actually where it is. They were told to, or they were defending themselves, and the Persians, they were shooting fire arrows at them, they were slinging at them, to no avail, until what we just did happened, which is the Persians are, of course, drawing an army from 1,000 nations of Asia, and a number of those people are going to be competent mountaineers. So what we just did, climbing up the bald rock face of the back of the Acropolis, where no one thought one could actually ascend, that's how the Persians got up here. And once these mountaineer troops got to the top, they began to kill the last holdouts, and they opened up the gate at the front. So I just wanted to show you that from the Acropolis. This is where Xerxes would have ascended to once he had fully conquered the city. Once he's here, he's now looking over the city of Athens and the potential naval battle. So I want to take this look up here. And we're going to look out over the Saronic Gulf. So over here we have the eastern side. Is that correct? Of the Piraeus. Sorry, over here, this is the military. There are two harbors, 1 and 2. These are the military harbors of Piraeus. And we can see a trireme over there. And then this is the Temple of Poseidon that we saw earlier. This is the Piraeus, and as I'm going to see how much elevation we can gain. We're now overlooking the direct, this is where the battlefield is going to end up taking place. So Xerxes now controls Athens and the port down here. The Athenians have deposited all of their family, the elderly, the women and children, are all going to be on this island of Salamis, where a confrontation is bound to take place. And the Persian navy is coming in. They came through this area between Euboea and the mainland. They went around the Cape of Attica. This is Cape Sunion, and here is where they are entering. So right now there is this discussion being had by the Greeks of where to hold out. And Themistocles is taking this Athenian line that has existed since the first Persian invasion of Greece at Marathon, where Miltiades said they've landed on the beaches, we need to take the fight to them. If they get inland, they will be able to spread out. Themistocles here says, we need to take the fight to them. These narrow straits here are our best shot. The Greek navy outnumbers us 3 to 1. If we fight in the open ocean, which they want to do, right? The Peloponnesians want to hole up in this peninsula down here with a wall here. That would make a likely naval invasion to be somewhere out here, out in the open ocean, where all of the numbers of the Persians can expand and engulf the much smaller Athenian fleet. Secondly, Themistocles says, all of our women and children, our families, have already been taken out of the city. We are no longer fighting for our city. We're fighting to win. And so if you don't accept battle where I want, right here in this Saronic Gulf between the island of Salamis and the mainland, um, we're going to leave. We're going to colonize a place in Sicily. We're out. You guys can have fun with your dinky ships. We have the best navy. We're supplying the majority of it. We're going to take the fight here, and we're going to take it now. And this helped to win them over, win the last commanders over. I'm going to see if there's anything up here that we can do now that would be appropriate, but I don't think there is. I do want to see that olive grove. And so, um, the Greeks decide this is that they will stand here, that they will join Themistocles and the Athenians, and they will make battle in this narrow strait, where their numbers will be more advantageous. So then we turn back to the Persian. So this is where it's going to happen, right? Look at how narrow this is. Hundreds of ships would be stationed here. Xerxes is fairly nervous about this. I shouldn't say fairly nervous, but at least he has a debate. He's like, where should we engage, and if so, when? And most of his advisors want to be seen as brave by him, and so they're just like, yeah, take it to them, you're going to win, easy, it's no problem. This is a problem of being an absolute ruler, is people just hype you up all the time. It goes to your head. The higher up you go, I heard something like, power's like oxygen, the higher you go, the less, or the common sense is like oxygen. The higher you go, the less there is, if that makes sense. So, Xerxes is like, we're going to be able to defeat them quite easily, bring in the ships here, and Themistocles actually sends a messenger in the middle of the night. It's kind of like a spy. Themistocles sends this guy to meet with Xerxes. He's like a trusted servant or a slave, and this guy tells Xerxes that Greeks are going to be escaping out the back around Salamis in the middle of the night. And so it's now or never. And so Xerxes has his entire fleet get out there in the middle of the night, stay up all night, guarding to make sure that the Greeks can't escape. And they're waiting to ambush them, and they think that this is going to be this crushing victory. It ends up meaning that the Persian fleet is completely sleep deprived the next morning. And so when the Greek forces come out, all in formation, to fight the Persians, who are not expecting them to be there, they're in big trouble. So let's go find up top. This is a reconstruction of the Acropolis from about 30 years after the Persians invaded. The Persians destroy this area. They burn it to the ground. So there's a sacred olive tree, and I wonder if I can find it real quick. Legend has it. This has got to be it. Legend has it that in the founding of Athens, Poseidon and Athena had a competition for who would be the patron god of the city, and they each offered a gift to Athens. Poseidon gave Athens a spring. This is it. Let's just call it this. This is all this water. Let's say that this is the salt spring. There was a salt spring that emerged at the top of the Acropolis. This was what Poseidon gave them as a token of him being the sea god. Athena gave them the olive tree, which, as we saw last stream, is much more important in terms of the economy, making oil, producing it, etc. And so Athena became the patron goddess of the city, and that is why we had this giant statue of her. Yay! But yeah, let's see. But that tree was burned down when the Persians invaded. Let's take a look at the statue of Athena. Athena Ergane. So I think this is the one where she's, yeah, the craftsman. So Athena gave Athens the olive tree, and this is going to be a way for them to make money, for them to find exports, for them to produce things. And so it's going to give them a huge amount of calories. It's also going to enable them to bathe, because that's what's better than bathing with olive oil. Truly, I can't think of anything. In many ancient texts, the goddess Athena bears the attribute Ergane, which refers to her patronage of craftsmen and artisans and other crafts. Athena Ergane was mainly associated with spinning and weaving. She protected women who produced textiles, and in return they offered her spindles, loom weights, raw wool, and textiles as dedications. On ancient painted vases, Athena Ergane was often represented as either an artisan in a tool-filled workshop or as an owl next to objects symbolizing certain crafts. I do love owls. For example, an owl next to a wool basket was sometimes stamped on loom weights used by weavers. It is not clear if Athena Ergane had an actual cult like Athena Polios, but it is evident that the goddess bearing this epithet received dedications and offerings from all sorts of artisans. Moreover, the sacred peplos given to the goddess during the Pan-Athenaea was woven under the auspices of Athena Ergane. So here's Athena Ergane right here, and here we have some textile merchants who don't have enough. I wonder, do you think people's butts just hung out of togas normally like this? Like, very. The guy obviously has a sculpted butt, but I don't know if he's showing that off on purpose or not. Or maybe Athena Ergane needs to do a bit better of a job inspiring her her weavers to cover the buttocks of the people they are weaving for. Here we're going to have another goddess, Artemis Brauronia. The sanctuary of Artemis Brauronia, or the Brauroneon, was located near the Propylaea. In a city dominated with dedications to Athena, the Brauroneon stood out for its focus on Artemis Brauronia. Man, I really hate having to say this word out loud so frequently. The goddess who presided over girls from puberty to childbirth. That's an interesting and cool demarcation of time. So that is kind of like the Greek version of female adolescence. It was likely installed by the ruler Pisistratus, a native of Brauron. It's probable the sanctuary was built for a smaller branch of the main cult of Artemis Brauronia. It consisted of a portico and a wooden statue that was later replaced with a marble one carved by the famous sculptor Praxiteles, who goes down as one of the most famous ancient Greek sculptors. This is, of course, not. This is based on a 4th century BCE bronze sculpture, and the Diana of Versailles. It doesn't say 2nd century Roman. Yeah, so most of our Greek statues are actually Roman copies. So I was looking for that Roman attribution. All right, let's see where else do we want to go. So we've seen this is where Xerxes is hanging out, trying to decide where his navy, swinging in across here, is going to make its battle. Let's see. I want to get over here because this is likely going to be Eleusis. And Eleusis is going to play a cool part. It's not the most major part, but it is something worth talking about, and I've wanted to talk about Eleusis for a long time. So we're going to have to get over for a while. So, in the meantime, I'll just fill you in on the history that is going on at this point. So, the Peloponnesians, as I've mentioned, have wanted to hold down at the Isthmus of Corinth, while Themistocles is trying to say we should hold up here near Athens. And Themistocles makes a point, that you're a bunch of scaredy cats. He doesn't actually say that. That would be a little too goading, but he does poke them a little bit. And the Peloponnesians truly are, especially under Sparta, a cautious people. Sparta is always terrified of leaving their homeland and allowing. Ooh, this is cool. We found the Areopagus. I wonder if there's something to look at. No, there's no marker here. That's disappointing. So the Areopagus is where the original aristocrats or oligarchs met. During this time, it continued to be a meeting place for the wealthiest. It's kind of like a senate um, in that a senate literally means group of old dudes who meet together and decide everybody else's fate, um, which is, I guess, exactly how it turned out in America. Um, so it's going according to plan there. Um, but yeah, so the Areopagus was where the old dudes of Athens met to decide and kind of steer the polis. However, with the boule kind of replaced it. It definitely replaced it in function, and but during this time, the rich people are still going to have a place where they're going to want to meet to decide things that are, you know, they're still political, but they're not as sanctioned. You have to remember that in ancient Greece, in ancient Athens, there's going to be formal and informal politics. There's a whole political structure of the polis. Oh, we're in the Piraeus now. Oh, we might as well. Well, we'll hit these last markers, but let me finish with the Areopagus. So we're going to meditate till it's morning. The Areopagus is going to be the center of the informal power. The elderly, powerful people of the richest families will meet there. They will discuss informally how things should go. They all have between them thousands of followers in this patron-client relationship that they can help. They can kind of persuade in the politics of the assembly. Eventually, the Areopagus loses all of its power and becomes a court to try murder. Stop yelling at my horse, dude. Oh my god. Yeah, move. But at this point, the Areopagus is still going to have some amount of power that is sanctioned by the state. Oh dear. Oh, this is plague. So, oh, this guy's got plague. No wonder he was yelling at my horse. This is not gonna go well. We are once again 50 years ahead of this. I'm sad that I just interacted with this. This would be much better to learn during the Peloponnesian War, but we'll have a whole thing that we talked about the plague here. But the plague of Athens was devastating. During the Peloponnesian War, Pericles' strategy was to avoid land combat with the Spartans in favor of taking advantage of Athens' naval supremacy. He also recommended that the population of Attica leave their houses and take refuge within Athens' walls. So this is why we saw at the beginning of the stream all these burned houses, because the Spartans were able to just come in, destroy the crops and houses of the Athenians, while the Athenians looked on from their walls. They're impregnable walls. At this point, they could supply themselves by sea from their walls. So the Spartans, they didn't have access to this great ramp technology, so they couldn't invade Athens like that. But they could devastate the crops, and so all the Athenians are in the walls of Athens, and then a plague strikes, and they're in this malnourished state of being in extremely close proximity to one another, and it's just a ripe area for contagion that probably killed a third of the Athenian population. This action of Pericles to bring everyone within the walls ended up vastly increasing the city's population. Many of the refugees ended up camping in Piraeus, which became crowded as a result. Within the same year, a plague began spreading through Piraeus. Due to the dense population, the epidemic quickly spread to Athens, killing approximately 25% of the population, including Pericles himself. And this is a portrayal. You have crazy figures of ancient plagues where just thousands of people die. And yeah, we're having, 2,000 people die from COVID every day, which is horrific. But it's spread across a population of 350 million. Meanwhile, you have thousands of people dying in Athens, and that is literally percentage points of the population. It's really quite tremendous how devastating these ancient plagues would be. So we're gonna hit these two areas of the Piraeus. We'll get down to the dockside. So we have these gutters. This is one example of sanitation, which would somewhat help, except the bubonic plague took no prisoners. And this actually isn't the bubonic plague. This is, I believe, typhoid. If I remember my students' excellent presentation on plague last year. There was a 2-week unit on the plague, and we had a whole bit of archaeopharmacology. I'm probably getting that wrong, but archaeoepidemiology maybe. That was quite cool. And we talked about all the different markers that we could look at that would tell us how to determine the DNA structure of the plague, to try to identify it. Because Thucydides, who's writing about events in 430, so much beyond what we've been talking about today, he's able to describe the symptoms of the plague in pretty good detail. Here are ship sheds. All right. Ship sheds is just a fun thing to say. Ship sheds were used to store ancient vessels called triremes. The sheds were essential as triremes required methodical overhauling during winter months when there was little to no naval navigation. This is because the seas are going to be too choppy, too stormy, and triremes would rot relatively quickly, and so there had to be constant maintenance on them. The earliest ship sheds were built in the time of Themistocles, that's the time we're talking about, and Pericles later built more sheds for the sum of 1,000 talents. The sheds were originally made of wood before transitioning to stone in the 4th century BC. So here are those ship sheds, and we have seen some before on stream, but we can look at them again. This is a system of dry docking, right? A place where you can take the boats out of the water in order to work on them without all the hampering of the sea. Come on. We got this. Splash, splash, splash. And here are the fortifications. Oh man, we're just like jumping the gun on this one, aren't we? Following the Greco-Persian Wars, Themistocles recommended that Athens fortify both the city and the port of Piraeus. So these are the long walls that Athens does not have. So at the time that we're talking, the Persians invade, and Athens is just here. It's 2 miles away from the Piraeus. And so that's why Athens did not want to stand up to a siege. The Persians would have been able to completely surround the city, starve them out. They would be able to be resupplied. And Athens was the instigator of the Greco-Persian Wars. They were the ones to send a fleet over to burn Sardis. Athens was the #1 polis on Xerxes' shit list. It's going down. This is why the Acropolis has been torched, why the king is occupying it, and why Themistocles was able to get the support of everyone to leave the city. After the war, though, Themistocles begins a fortification project. He'd already inspired the population to build Piraeus, which is a more defensible port. Remember, this is because the Aeginetans were able to just sail right in and burn this Phaleron port here. So Themistocles spearheaded the creation of the Piraeus port, and then he spearheads this construction of the long walls. And this is where that extra population of Atticans during the Peloponnesian War came in. This is where the homeless population lived. Attica was emptied because the Spartans could just rampage in it, and the people who moved into these squalid conditions between these long walls, and there they caught plague and died by the thousands. These fortifications started under Themistocles and were further strengthened by Pericles and Cimon. Their efforts contributed to the creation of the so-called Long Walls that ensured Athens always had access to its port, even in times of war. So these walls, again, walls being impregnable in this time. They don't have gunpowder or trebuchets or anything like that. These cannot be broken, and so they would be created after the Persian invasion. And at this point, this weak area of our walls, we are going to... Apparently we can't jump, or I'm just bad at playing video games. We know that that's true. Let's see, where am I trying to get? I'm trying to go northwest. Is that the place I've selected? Yes, this is the place I've selected. Okay. So let's head, and we can finally... Oh! And then we'll finally cross to Salamis. We should do that first, actually. No, we're going to do this first. Sorry for the prevarication, but we must. So let's call our trusty steed and do some cross-country steeding. So we're heading to Eleusis. Eleusis is the site of the lesser and the greater Eleusinian Mysteries. The mysteries are one thing that we call it because anyone who had been inducted into them was not allowed to tell anyone what happened. This is something to do with Demeter. Demeter is the goddess whose daughter Persephone was abducted by Hades, and for half a year, Demeter belongs to Hades in the underworld. And so during that time, the world dies in what we call winter. So the Eleusinian Mysteries are about death, and then the spring and the rebirth. And so what my conclusion from what very, very little we know is that people gathered en masse. We're at the sanctuary of Eleusis. They gathered en masse in this area, and they drank a hallucinogenic potion called the Kikeon. They went through religious rites of dying and then being reborn. Imagine these priests in this area. This is called the Eleusinian, I believe. Priests would lead them through this ritual, and then they would be reborn on the other side as new people, and all of the greatest luminaries had been inducted here. This is truly a beautiful shrine. This is one of the most holy shrines, in the same way that the Oracle of Delphi is the most important oracle. This is one of the most important shrines in the ancient world. So let's take a look at this. I'm actually really excited to be here. The reason that we're doing this today is that when Xerxes has taken Athens, and it's clear that the entire area of Attica has been depopulated. An Athenian exile who had been brought with the Persians heard what sounded like the footsteps of 30,000 processioners chanting the Iakos, which is a chant that the people make as they are marching from Athens and wherever they start to Eleusis during the sacred procession. This is how the Eleusinian Mysteries start. This happens every year for the lesser mysteries at this time that the Persians are invading, and then every 4 years are the greater mysteries, or I guess they just drip even more balls. The Chore Phrasikleia is one of the most important works of archaic sculpture. It depicts a young woman, Chore, and was found in Attica during excavations next to a young male statue. The statue is dated to 550 to 530 BC and depicts a Chore wearing sandals, a full-length sleeved chiton, and a tall kalathos decorated with flowers. In her hand she holds a lotus bud. She is also wearing earrings, a necklace, and 2 bracelets. The height of the statue is 1.79 meters, and the preservation of its polychromy, which means we can still see some of its paint. Right? These did not used to be pure marble white. They used to be painted. And the preservation of its multicolors is astonishing. Recent research confirms the use of 11 different colorants as well as gold and lead foil. We know the name of the deceased Phrasikleia because it is inscribed on the base of the statue. Her young age is also implied, as she is called Maiden in the inscription, meaning she died before she got married. On the left side of the base is the name of the sculptor, Aristion of Paros. Paros being where we get Parian marble, which is this very famous high-grade marble. The base was not buried with the Chore, but it was used as a building material in a nearby church where it was recovered. Yeah, so classic. You have these ancient sculptors making this really cool stuff, and then, because it's already mined, in later years, especially with the more, a lot of things would just be broken into pieces because you don't have to mine it. You can just take it from a building that the ancient Greeks made and turn it into a church or your house. Aristion fabricated and signed other statues as well, which allow us to date the creation of the statue of Phrasikleia to between 550 and 530. It's not impossible that the artist was associated with the sphere of power of the tyrants of Athens, that the statue might have belonged to the Pisistratid family, who we've encountered a number of times. So I don't know why we got that here. We are in the Eleusis Telestereon. This is the Holy of Holies for this area. I wonder if we're going to get any data about it. But this is where, imagine, priests chanting, sacrifices being made, braziers burning, and you're taking a drug that transports you to Hades. It's truly, I know this is a PG-13 rated stream, but it's it really would be quite the religious experience. I mean, nowadays we have chanting and singing and all sorts of good stuff. No doubt about that. Can't knock religious ceremony, but yeah, definitely adding the Kikaon in would change the process. Um, it looks like, yeah, unfortunately they didn't. This is a beautifully done place, and Assassin's Creed Odyssey, I'm sure, has a lot of cool stuff to do here. But I would love it if they had a tour. I guess because the problem is these are mysteries. No one talked about them. There's a number of times that, like, you know, the ancient people were so much more superstitious, and and also oath bound. When you swore an oath, you actually didn't break it. So we don't know what happened in these mysteries because everyone swore to uphold the secrecy of them. It's really cool. I mean, today people would be TikToking from inside. I guess the closest thing we have is like the Kaaba, which is that large black uh, cube in Mecca that everyone circles around, and the whole, you can't know what's inside of it. Let's take a look at this. Yeah, so we're getting this good view of the Telestereon. This is a relief of Demeter and Persephone, mother and daughter. Eleusis is a city in West Attica at the northern end of the Saronic Gulf, and at a distance of 20 kilometers from the center of Athens. The city of Eleusis was practically unknown until the 1930s, when excavations determined the shape of the classical city. High on the summit, the Acropolis of Ellucis was fortified since the Mycenaean period, and the sanctuary of Demeter was situated lower down the hill and outside of the fortification. According to the Homeric hymn to Demeter, Demeter herself introduced the mysteries at Eleusis during the quest for her daughter Persephone. At some point, Demeter stopped at the palace of King Keleos, and as a gift for his hospitality, she taught Triptolemus the art of agriculture. That's huge. Okay, so Eleusis is, I forgot to mention, the site of agricultural start in Attica and potentially the world, right? This is Demeter giving this lesson of what would spawn civilization to the people. From him, the rest of Greece was educated in agriculture, and it is in Demeter's honor that the people of Eleusis built a sanctuary. Demeter also taught the people the rites to the Mysteries, a secret cult restricted to initiates. The hymn to Demeter provides the association between myth and ritual and builds a necessary connection for the establishment of the Eleusis cult. I believe the only requirement to be initiated was you couldn't have committed murder, and you had to be an adult. I might be wrong, though. So if there's anyone in the chat, can check my work on that one. I'd appreciate it. So let's see, where's the next? Beautiful gardens, and we see all this wheat being given as a sacrifice. Right, here's a classic shrine or altar to Demeter, where you have the fruits of her planting of the harvest to give back to the goddess of the harvest. The Telesterion. The Telesterion was the most important building of the sanctuary at the far end of the Sacred Way. This was the temple that was dedicated to Demeter and the place where the cults and mysteries took place. It was here that the climax of the Eleusinian ceremonies happened, and it was in the Telesterion that the priestesses revealed their visions, and the initiates were prohibited from discussing the events that took place. The Telesterion was a square or a rectangular building of approximately 50 meters across with 2 entrances on each side, with an exception on the western side that was built on the rock. Inside there were 8 rows of seats and 40 columns supported the roof. In the center of the roof there was a hole from where light would enter the temple. In the center of the Telesterion was a rectangular room called the Anactoron, where all the sacred objects of the cult were kept and where only the Hierophant could enter, the Hierophant being the number 1 priest of Eleusis. That being said, my understanding is that the priests of Delphi were the only full-time ones. So I do wonder with Eleusis, being that it's such an important site of a cult, if the priests were full-time or if they themselves had day jobs and were regular people, and what that mix between public and private function was for the Hierophant. That is a word I definitely don't know how to pronounce. Today, the architectural remains visible on the site are those of the classical building. That's hard. The architectural remains visible on the site. Architectural remains visible. Am I reading this wrong? It seems like these words could mean two things, and I'm reading it with the wrong inflection. Anyway, the architecture remains visible, I think is what they probably mean. And I just got Victoria Bibo. I don't know who this is, but she looks modern. Let's switch away from our Spartan soldier, given that we are in Athens, and switch to... Where is this person? Victoria Bibo. Wow, look at her. 90 Explorer. She supervises Layla Health as she uses the Animus. Okay, so this is from Assassin's Creed. This looks so weird. I don't know if we can do this, guys. So, again, the reason that we're here in Eleusis now is that it was heard that there were spirits. You know, the spirits of Athens were marching to Eleusis in the procession of the Mysteries, and were chanting the Iacchos. Here is further areas. And I just love looking at the architecture of this sanctuary at Eleusis. We got to change out of the pencil skirt. I'm sorry, I can't do it. We will stay female. I think that's fair. But we can't stay with Victoria. We'll do Kyra. Leader of a rebellion. Love that. Cool. I wonder who the statue is to. It's not a statue. It's a small shrine. And this might be... Oh, this could be Persephone. Let's just say it is. And it looks like this is a place to enter. Or at least one of them. One thing I love about the ancient architecture is they have all this public architecture. You just walking through it. Can we hit all of the places in Eleusis? So we have the walls here. What we learned is that the city of Eleusis is further back up the hill, surrounded by a wall, and that the sanctuary is below it. But it looks like they kind of conflated the two. And now finally, we're gonna head to Salamis and I think we'll wrap up there. On Sunday, we'll do the actual Battle of Salamis, and then I think we'll do that in Total War. So we're going to give myself a little bit of time to practice, because as we saw last time, that was embarrassing. How poorly I did at naval combat. I am no Themistocles. And yeah, so we'll just we'll hit up Salamis. I should get on the horse. So we're going to go back through Attica. We're going to retrace our steps. And we're going to look at many of the fields. We can see the crops. Eleusis is one of the most fertile areas of Attica. It was a deme that provided a lot of grain. Remember, though, that Athens is, in the 6th century, stops being able to support itself from its local stores, and maybe even before that. And so at this point, they started to colonize Euboea with clerices. Clerices are where they export Athenian citizens, but the clerices don't become new polis like most colonies. Instead, they retain a tie to the mother country. I guess, no, I don't think we need to go to Euboea today. We went to Euboea a little bit, and we can do that also again in the Peloponnesian War. So here we are at the Piraeus naval port. It looks like the Piraeus is on this side. We have the construction of the long wall, so we're going completely outside the Piraeus. We see this area. This is the Emporion that we explored a few weeks ago. This is the commercial area. These long walls are, of course, not here when, at least I don't think they're here when the Persians invade. So we're going to have to take a swim. The Persians are entering this area for the first time, whereas the Greeks have only recently left the port of Piraeus to sail across and uh, dock at Salamis. This whole area, though, is going to be controlled by the Greeks. So the Greek fleet has holed up, and they decide to station themselves in this narrows. So once the Persian fleet comes out to meet them, um, or tries to trap them, they're trying to trap them around the island of Salamis. So between... Can I go any faster than this? Not really. So, excuse me while I crawl slowly across the Saronic Gulf, but honestly, she's going a lot faster than I could. I'm a terrible swimmer. But this is going to be the area where the Greeks will make their stand. There's going to be 200 to 300 Greek triremes that will come out against maybe 500 or 600 Persian triremes. And the Persians, Xerxes detaches the Egyptians to sail around the island because Themistocles has informed him that there will be Greeks trying to flee. This means that a crucial contingent of soldiers, the Egyptians being the second best, renowned as the second best sailors in Xerxes' fleet, they're not going to be part of the battle. So during this battle, once it is met, the Greeks come straight at them, and the Persians, as we've seen at Thermopylae, as we saw a little bit happen at Artemisium, start to push up against each other. And as the Greek fleet engages and ships begin to be destroyed, the Persian ships are, as they keep coming, they start to crash against each other. You get a jam. And I really want to climb up these walls. I guess she's so tired she can't climb a steep rock face. I'm sorry to hear that. Here we go. Hopefully. They start to get jammed up against the Greeks, so they're not able to retreat or maneuver. And the Greeks are able to kind of go in and out. Oh, this is the temple? They're not even... I really hope that this gives us something about Salamis. Here we go. The Battle of Salamis. So here's an epic oil painting from much later, 1858. The Battle of Salamis took place in 480 BC and ended in a stunning victory for the Greeks. The battle marked the beginning of the end of the Second Persian invasion of Greece. So we are in 2020. All the 2,500-year anniversaries of Salamis were put on hold. Unfortunately, they're not going to happen, I doubt, because this is an incredibly important battle. After the Greek loss at the Battle of Thermopylae, central Greece was open to invasion by King Xerxes and his Persian forces. Xerxes was closer than ever to the vengeance he sought for the humiliation his father Darius suffered during the first Persian invasion of Greece. However, the city of Athens was much stronger than it had been during Darius' time. Rich with resources from the Laurian silver mines, the city used its considerable funds to finance its military effort, with the general Themistocles ordering the construction of 200 triremes. The Athenian strength was bolstered by their cooperation with other Greek cities. At Salamis, the Greeks faced their enemy together. The battle itself occurred at sea in a small, closed bay west of Athens. It was hard fought on both sides, but in the end, the Persians suffered far more casualties than the Greeks. So, this is where it all comes to a head. In this area, between Salamis and Piraeus here, the Persian army was destroyed. It was coming in here. The Greeks came out to meet it and destroyed them. And there is a small island in here where the Persians had put 400 troops to kill any Greeks who washed up on shore, because it was at the mouth of this harbor, at the mouth of this gulf, and was where all the ships were going to wash up. And the Persians who were stationed there were the final casualties of the Battle of Salamis, when a Greek general, Aristides, landed on it with a force of hoplites and slingers and massacred all of them. When this happened, the Persian fleet was heavily reduced, and was not going to be able to continue to resupply the giant army that Xerxes had brought. This spelled the end. Xerxes at this point said, I don't want to be here anymore. I'm out, and most of my army needs to go with me. And at this point, Xerxes began to make preparations to retreat. Xerxes does not want to spend the winter in Greece. This is not a pleasurable place. It's on the ass end of his empire. It doesn't seem to be going well. And his general Mardonius volunteers to take over the this is Artemis, but this temple is to Athena. And Mardonius, this general who he even speaks a bit of Greek, he really has it out for the Greeks and is portrayed as enemy number 2 behind Xerxes himself by Herodotus. Mardonius begins to make plans to finish the conquest of Greece the following year in 479 BC. And so he begins to select troops and contingents from the army, Xerxes preparing to bring the rest of them back home with him. Here's a ruined temple to Ajax. Ajax was apparently from Salamis, and we've encountered Ajax before. He ends up killing himself when he loses the funeral games and right to take Achilles' armor to Odysseus. All right, so that's about it. Today I hope it wasn't too dry. There were no tours, but I gave you a tour myself of these areas. I hope I didn't talk too much. If you ended up tuning in, let me know your thoughts on this tomorrow in school. I appreciate any and all feedback. So once again, here we are at the Island of Salamis, overlooking Piraeus and the Gulf in which the Athenians won their victory. Actually, let's do a head-to-toe look at Salamis. I see that there is a polis up ahead, and I want to check it out. There's no location here. There's no location of interest, but since when will that stop us? Taking a goat path. We have a small bark or ship over here that might be, and I think that's actually, can we see the Temple of Eleusis? No, that is, I think so. We're looking north, no, we're looking at Megara right now, and that is one of the Isthmian polis. It's at the very top. Ooh, this is cool. Here's a tomb. Mycenaean tomb of Ajax. So, as with all the heroes of the Bronze Age, these are the heroes from the Trojan War. And so they are from the Mycenaean period, and they have a whole set of different funeral rites. And so it's cool that you have the heroes and legends of the ancient world actually have a presence. Now, it's not clear to me whether this presence would have been known if they had access to these tombs, if they knew where they were. Oh, cool. Here's a marble quarry employed by the Athenians. I'm glad I'm not always just going for points of interest. So this marble quarry is going to be very important in the creation of the Acropolis. Remember, we saw the top of the Acropolis, which is completely destroyed by the Persians. And so for decades afterwards, it remained a desecrated, burned hulk and ruin to act as a reminder to the Athenians of what the Persians had done. But eventually, Athens gets rich enough that Pericles is like, hey, our empire is paying us a lot of money. Let's spend it on these. Let's spend it on reconstructing this area in marble ornamentation, and that's when it becomes as beautiful as we all know and love. So here we have a guy splitting this rock apart. What would often happen is once these holes would be made, at least this is how the Egyptians did it, they would put wood in there, and then they'd soak the wood. The wood would expand, and it would break the marble into these giant slabs, these giant blocks. And then these would be exported. Let's see if we can see how they would be exported. Here's a cart. And so you're probably just going to drop. Okay, so here we can see how they were being chiseled apart. I wonder if we can see an intermediate process between spiking in the, what would you call those things that the guy's hammering in? Like a chisel, almost a chisel, but not quite. Here they're making gravel, looks like much smaller stones, breaking them into chunks, and then they're going to put them on rollers. Here we have rollers that's going to enable them to transport them to the dock. Look, more rollers. Ubisoft, excellent job as usual. And then a crane that's going to help them lower this onto a ship. How awesome is that? So if anyone from class is watching and wants to write something about a marble quarry, you can definitely get some bonus economic points for that. And I think the city that I have set my sights on is just on the other side of this hill. And at that point, I think I'm going to call it early. Who needs an hour and a half stream when I'm doing a dry lecture? And I'm going to eat some banh mi. Where's the city? Oh, it's down there. I overshot it because I got excited about a quarry. Because I'm a Dorcas Maximus. Gotta do it. So I think there's a whole thing, I think in Naxos, about marble quarrying, and so hopefully we'll get a point of interest in some archaeological information about that. Nice little river. Salamis. So Salamis is where the all the Athenians, all the families were stationed, awaiting the drama of the Battle of Salamis. They're like biting their nails because they're in big trouble if their sons, fathers, and husbands lose the battle. Then they're going to be captured and murdered, massacred, and at least the men will be castrated if you're a boy and enslaved if you're a woman. That's what would happen to all of the losers. So the stakes could not have been higher, and that's one of the reasons I think that the Athenians probably came out on top, and the Aeginetans and the other Greeks from these areas. In this debate with between Adamantus, the Corinthian, Naxos is the best, and we're going to go there hopefully in the next few weeks. In the debate between the Corinthian Adamantus and Themistocles, Themistocles said, what about the Salaminians? What about the Aeginetans? What about the Megarians, to say nothing of us Athenians? If you want to retreat there, you are leaving us out to dry. And this is the biggest problem. And the problem that we're seeing in class is if Greeks start to fight each other, they all fall apart. The most important thing in this defense against Persia is that you have enough Greeks defending the homeland and not Medizing. We've already lost Boeotia and Thebes, Mytilene, and the Ionian Greeks are fighting alongside the Persian fleet, the Persian army, and so the list of allies is growing narrower day by day. And here we have the continuation of Salamis. So this is where the families of Athens would be stationed. And I think at this point, I will sign off, taking a look at this beautiful harbor of Piraeus. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, I appreciate it. I hope you guys learned something. And I will see most of you tomorrow in class. Have a good night, guys.